I think both Steve and Helen make me wish that I'd not bailed out of a career in ecology so soon. But a lot of the themes that they've already mentioned, I think, are things that are common to what I want to say, which is finding something that you love to do, and also taking opportunities as they arise. I've met a few people in my life who seem to have a very set idea of a career path, but I think equally you need to be able to take opportunities that as they arise and be flexible about what you do. And I think thirdly, the other common theme is the importance of networking, the importance of establishing good networks, and also about maintaining them throughout your career, because they really will serve you well. When I was asked to talk here, I thought I wouldn't just talk about myself, and I'm sorry there's no pictures, it's just text, but I'm a wordsmith, so I thought how if I was writing a piece about careers in science journalism or in journalism, what would I do? And I thought, well, I would actually not really talk about myself, but I would go and interview a couple of other people and try and reflect what that job was like for people other than myself. So I have got a first degree in environmental science. I started a PhD and failed out very quickly. Steve mentioned individuals in your career that have an impact, and I had a similar moment with Steve about somebody in my undergraduate degree saying to me, you can do better, and then going on to do as well as I could and getting a first. And that was something that turned on one conversation, and so that was quite interesting. But equally, I remember in my PhD, when I was struggling and wondering whether to go on, somebody said to me, you really will be the one person who knows more about this tiny thing than anybody else in the world. And that horrified me, the idea of that. And I think that's what did for me, really, and why I found my way into journalism, which was via scientific publishing. I moved into magazines. I then went back to Imperial and did an MSc part-time in science communication. There are a lot of courses that exist like that now, but at the time Imperial was quite pioneering. I then have spent the last 10 or 12 years working freelance, so I am my own boss. I work for the BES for a set number of hours a week, but I also write for The Guardian, I write for The Telegraph, I write for a number of magazines. My clients include universities, some research councils, and used to include government departments, but not anymore. I write features mainly, and interviews are the heart of what I do. Being my own boss is great. I have a huge variety in my work, a great deal of flexibility about when I work and when I don't work. Helen talked a bit about teamwork, and I think that's the main thing that I miss as a freelance journalist. I work on my own. Journalism is now quite an isolating profession. Most journalists don't get paid enough to go out and to interview people face to face, particularly if you're talking about travelling any kind of distance. So the lack of teamwork and the lack of colleagues is something that I do miss. And occasionally I go back into contract work for maternity leave cover or for an annual contract somewhere, just to try and socialise myself again. Obviously, I don't have sick pay, I don't have holiday pay, but the other things I think make up for those kind of basics. Steve talked about work as a habit, or habits as part of your career, and I think in journalism is not being a good writer. I think apart from the great novelists and great poets, I think journalism is a craft. It's something that you learn by doing, and you learn by spending a lot of hours doing. It's about meeting deadlines. Steve also mentioned, and Helen mentioned curiosity and the need to be observant, because that's most of the most interesting stories are outside you. They're not stuff to do with yourself. The ability to be a good listener, and again, this making and keeping good contact is vital. But I did ask 2 or 3 other people about their routes into journalism. This is a journalist whose work you'll see every day on the BBC News website. Most of the nature and environment stories are his. He has came into environment writing through a very traditional broadcast journalism route, worked in local radio, worked as a freelance, but then spent quite a few years in London working for an environmental organisation, which is where his specialist knowledge comes from. He, like Helen and like Steve, talks about long hours, the ability to be flexible, enthusiasm being key, and one of the things that he said about getting experience was the importance of trying to work with local media, so offering stories to local media or making contacts with local media. The second person that I asked about their route into science is somebody that I work with at Cambridge. She edits one of the university's magazines, and her route in was as a scientist and a DPhil, and spent quite a few years as a bench scientist in postdoctoral research in immunology. But she then went into scientific publishing, and a route in communication through scientific publishing is quite common, and it's a route that demands the kind of specialist qualifications that she has. The key skills that she said she thought were essential were an eye for detail, being good at spelling. And she said that she liked project management, which appalled me a bit, but she illustrated it by describing it in a way of finding a good story and researching it and gathering information and speaking to the people that you need to bring it to life, and the buzz that she gets out of then seeing that in print, which is something that I can empathise with because it's not an easy task. This is somebody who is a press officer full-time, so a bit of the kind of work that I do with the BES. And her job is really much more news-based. She'll be looking for stories coming out of an academic community. She specialises in science. She says her route into science journalism or science communication was unconventional, but I think all our routes into this kind of area are pretty unconventional. She's American, has a degree and a master's, and then started working in communications for the US Senate before she moved to the UK and to the University of Cambridge. She's somebody that says, which is I can empathise with a bit, which is the advantage of not being a specialist about the things that you're writing about. I think communicating things that you find exciting but that you're not an expert about brings a lot to your writing and to the process of research that you use to communicate something that I think can be quite difficult for experts to do. I think that's probably one of the reasons that a lot of scientists are not great communicators. I think they have it beaten out of them at an early age in the way that they write peer-reviewed papers, but also that ability to step back and to understand what it is about what you do that's interesting or important from a layperson's point of view is sometimes quite difficult to do. So I find interviewing people whose work I know nothing about paradoxically more easy, and it allows you to really kind of hang your ego up, and you can ask people the really dumb questions because you really don't know, and you have no reason. There's no reason why you should know. She talks about the things that she likes, and that comes from this constant interaction with people whose field of research you know nothing about, but that you end the day having learned something from, which is one of the things that I really love about my job. And I'm kind of half of me is reluctant to encourage people to go into careers in science communication, because Steve said the world needs ecologists, and I kind of think the world really needs ecologists more than it needs journalists. But it would be nice if ecologists could do both. Like, Helen is a really great example of an ecologist who works her nuts off communicating and to a wide variety of audiences. I've worked with Helen on stories with the media, but she talks to all sorts of people. She talks to big groups of the public, she talks to kids, she talks to... And I think that even if you're not interested in science communication as a career, that's something that you might take with you from today, that you really might think deeply about the responsibility that you have as ecologists to communicate what you do, and not just amongst your peers, not just amongst papers in the ecology letters or in the journal of applied ecology, but to think about how you can infuse the people around you, because I think it's only by doing that things will change. Karen, or these can be put up somewhere if you're interested in the kind of courses that are around. There are loads of them now. That's the one that I did at Imperial. City University, I noticed, has just started a science journalism postgraduate course. I think that started 2 years ago. The contact at the BBC mentioned that he'd just spoken to a group at Salford University where there's a wildlife documentary course, which I didn't know about. There are lots of short courses outside your research councils. The NUJ runs great courses on news writing, on feature writing, and there are a couple of blogs that I thought were quite interesting takes on communicating science that you might dig them out of.